I'm Tex Miller. I live in Cookeville, Tennessee, and I've been playing guitar for about 15 years. And in that time, I've learned a lot about working on guitars. As a working musician, I found that it costs a lot of money to always have your guitar worked on, so I got interested in doing general repairs on an instrument, and this is pretty much what a normal workbench would look like. I've got a stand for my guitar, some support for the neck while I'm working on it, and primarily I make nuts for guitars, which is the top piece that goes right here, the strings to go through, and I make saddles, and this is the part that you see that the strings actually go straddle right here, just like you would sit on a saddle. That's what the strings are doing right here. And when you buy commercially manufactured guitars, a lot of times they're going to come with a nut that's made out of plastic like this, and there's nothing wrong with that, except you don't really get the maximum tone production out of an acoustic instrument. And this is a bigger deal with acoustic guitars than it would be with an electric guitar. And plus the plastic can wear out over time. So what I do is actually work with bone, and this would usually be a cow's bone, something like that. And you can actually get bones from butchers, anything like that, and shape them to blanks yourself, but I order these already at least shaped to this point, and the same for a saddle. So they're both bone, and it's gonna pretty much last forever, and looks really nice on the guitar. They polish well, and it's gonna give me the best sound possible out of the acoustic. So this is a nice Martin guitar that I have, and I play this guitar regularly. It's my main guitar, and I paid a fair amount for it, and I want to know that I'm going to get the best sound out of it. So these extra little things help out a lot. Now, beyond that, what these do, the saddle controls the height of the strings, and the nut controls the height of the strings, and that's how hard basically it's going to be to play the guitar. You don't want them too low, or you're going to get the strings are going to buzz all over the place, which is something nobody wants. So you have to learn over time how to shape these, and the overall height of the string is going to be mainly affected by these slots.
Does that affect the sound?
Yeah, if the slots are too tight, you'll get a real subdued sound if it pinches the string. And it takes time to hear those kinds of things. I've worked on people's guitars, and maybe all the strings will sound good except for one string, and they think they have a dead string, which sometimes is the case where a string's just in bad shape, but a lot of times it'll be one string that maybe the person working on it didn't slot that string properly. And I'll show you what slotting is here in just a second. But if they're too wide, then the string will bounce back and forth in the slot. So I actually use, so we'll talk about making the nut first. There's an order that you'll want to go in. In general, if I'm starting from scratch on a guitar, I'm going to take, and this is the traditional way of doing it, which is worth mentioning. You know, this is, besides the fact that I get these pre-shaped, everything else is done. These are guitar-specific tools, but I could just as easily be using files that I would have had to maybe shape to a certain thickness or something like that. But these are basically guitar-specific files that I've ordered. But you could technically do this from the hardware store or anything like that. So it's totally, 100% handmade, really. So we're going to take these and basically make working awesome, pretty guitar components. So what I'll do is these files are what we're going to use to actually make these slots that you see here. But before that, say we have a piece like this, we have a slot here, a channel, and I'll bring that over here. You can see that is not going to go down in that channel. So, and you also want to make sure this channel is nice and flat, and you can do that with these files as well. I'm not going to do that because it's already perfect. But so what you'll do is, that's not right. It's not going to fit in there. Obviously the sides are too big. But the first thing you want to do is you want to get this nut to where it's going to slide down in this slot. Okay. And the only way to do that is to take some coarse grit sandpaper. This is 120, and then you can come to the sides of the guitar and you can put pencil marks. I've got the strings off so we can kind of see this a little bit better. You can put pencil marks, but really the best way is to take a little bit off at a time. So it really is kind of a cool art, because you have to feel it. You know, if you take too much, you're already done. So you can really mess this process up pretty quick, and it's important that you take your time, because if you start shaving too fast, so you basically. So I'm just taking some of the material off by sanding it. And if you go too quick, then this doesn't. You want this to slide down nice and tight. You don't want anything moving anywhere, so you don't get any buzzing or anything like that. And it's just part of the craftsmanship. You want it to fit right. So anyway, so you'll get that to where you want it, and then you would then take a pencil, and I like to work from the middle part. So I would mark the sides at the proper width. I would measure that and then mark the sides, and then you can put this in the vise. This is actually a vise that's made for this. You could use any vise, but this has sloped sides. So the sides make it to where I can really get with my files at an angle when I need to. So you would take this is also a guitar specific saw, but it could be any kind of coping saw or anything like that, or a jeweler's saw. So I would basically cut off the excess from this. Just go through it. It's not too hard to do. I can actually take a little bit. You see how quick this is. So I'm already close to halfway through it. Anyway, you'll take the sides off, and these a lot of times you'll hold to the table with clamps. I've got a plastic table here, so it doesn't work so well, but with my wood table that I might ordinarily use, I'll clamp this in position so it doesn't move at all, and I'll use that throughout the whole process, because you're going to be getting pretty physical with all this. So now I might have something that looks kind of like this. Maybe this is going to fit in the slot a little bit better. This isn't specific to this guitar, but it's a pretty good example. This actually has a sloped bottom that's kind of hard for you to see right now. There's an angle on that channel, so if you have to file that's just another part of the filing process that maybe goes into a little bit too much detail for what we're doing here. But you can see the sides are trimmed, so that's just another step in the process. So if we're good with the channel, if we're good with the sides, now the sides we want to try to get close to right, and we'll perfect that a little bit later too. You don't want to get ahead of yourself and polish it or make the sides perfect, because you might get to the very last stage and really mess something up, and then you've got this thing you spent all this time on. So you want to really get it to where it's manageable, kind of like this, and then you want to measure out your string spacing, and there are several tools you can use. I'll use a ruler, and I know what these what kind of string spacing I'm looking for, and you can find that in books and things like that. There's also a ruler you can use. I'll use something like this. So it'll basically lay out the distance these need to be, and I'll draw a line in the center, and then I'll use the proper slot or files to give me the proper diameters. Okay. But once we've got everything kind of close to where it needs to be before we're doing the slots, it'll look something like this. And again, you don't want to get too crazy, but you will have to get this angle on the back. You'll put this in the vise, and you'll use, basically, these are called these are rasping files, and you can get these at a hardware store, and these go from coarse to medium to fine to extra fine. So, and you're physically going to get on the back side of this, and like I said, this would be clamped down, so I wouldn't be having any movement. And I personally would be achieving this angle 100% by feel at this point. If you're just getting into it, I would recommend taking the nut that was already on the guitar, or finding a picture, because as you can see, that's what you're going for. You got to get this angle, because the strings have what they call a break angle. The headstock, which is this part, leans back, so the strings can't just come straight off. They have to angle back, and all that'll prevent you from getting buzzes and such. So we got to create that angle, and so that's what I'm doing here. I would continue to do that to some degree. Again, I would keep it rough because I don't want to get too much done. We'll fix all that in the final polishing stages. So I'm going to get a basic angle going, and come out with something like that. And then I've measured out my spacing, and I'll use the actual nut that I made for this guitar, and here's what it looks like at the end. But to get to that point, so I'll put this in.
How long did that take you?
This?
Yeah.
Probably about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, because it's my main guitar, and I'm picky about them anyway. But so that took about 3 to 4 hours, and you can this is my way of doing it. There's a couple different ways that you can do these things, but so I've measured my string spacing out, and let's suppose that these slots aren't quite there yet. What I would do to save these files a little bit, I would start these slots with a saw and just cut just a little bit to get it started. I would also take a piece of tape and put on the headstock to protect it and keep slingshotting out of here. But obviously wouldn't do that if there's pressure on it. So now, then what I would do is take all my strings, kind of go ahead and get them up here, because this saw would give me enough of a slot to at least set a string in. Alright. Now I would tighten all this down. Actually, I would tune the guitar. I'm not going to do that yet because I want to take the saddle off to show you that process. Basically, I would get the guitar as close to in tune as I could. I would probably go through and make better divots so these hold a little bit better. Get everything kind of where it needs to be. And then I would start with the bass string. And these are called feeler gauges. And what these actually do is they're going to give me, by laying this across the frets and then sliding this through, it gives me roughly the how tall this fret is. So in order for the string not to buzz, I've got to be as tall as the fret and then some extra. So it's basically a process of, then I'll take, say this is a 0.034 inches, and so I would start high, because you don't want to go too low. If you go too low, that's what this is for. This is my bone dust collection. and you actually have to fill the slot, and then you use really thin super glue, and it's a heck of a process to get it all. You have to keep packing it and gluing it and then re-slot it. So you don't want to do that, but that's why I have it, because I do make mistakes like that. So then I would slide this through, and this is the fretboard of the guitar. They all have a slight radius. So I'm going to make sure that I'm putting some pressure on that to bend it along with the radius of the guitar. And then I would take, these are gauged. Both sides have a gauge to them. This is a .050 and a .060. So I would then take whatever gauge I'm looking for and maintain. Let me come over here so you can see this. I wouldn't be working quite like this, but I would maintain that angle that I was talking about and actually come through the slot and until I hit metal. And then so what I would do is then it's basically a very long process. One reason why this takes so long is now at this point all I can do if it's not low enough is grab a smaller feeler gauge, another size lower, put it on and keep checking it, and once I get it low enough, not get too adventurous and try to take it too low, because you just have to stop at some point, or else the string, when you play it, it's going to hit that first fret as it kind of rotates, and you're going to get string buzz. So I'll do that to every string, so that's why that takes, that process takes a while. And then once you get it to the height, the string to the height you want, you've got to kind of come through and smooth them out. And I'll actually take the excess string that I've cut off and I'll slide it through the slot, and it'll kind of polish those out. There are other products you can buy to do that, but that's how I do it. And so once we have everything, the strings are sitting nice, we'll shape the final stages, and you'll do that. It's a process of putting this in the vise, shaping the sides, putting it back, and checking it. You really have to keep doing it over and over again, because there's no finite measurement that you can't. It doesn't work that way. You have to. All guitars are slightly different. There's a standard, but you have to. It's trial and error, and you have to keep going back, and you have to keep taking the strings off and putting them back on. Or loosening them. It's tedious, but that's why it's an art, and that's why it's a cool thing to be able to do. And I pretty much taught myself. I learned from books and just from doing things on instruments that I really didn't care about. But once I got it, it's awesome, because if something's not right about my instrument, I can adjust it. And this is how you have to do it. An electric guitar is complicated in other ways, but they're a little bit easier in some respects, because you're not dealing with bone. So once we get this about where we want it, something else that's going to affect the height of the string greatly is the saddle. And again, the bone is going to give us the maximum tone production. It resonates really, really well. And these strings, when they vibrate, the vibration is coming straight through that and going right into the soundboard, as well as coming through the hole. And it creates a much better sound if this is done right. So what I would do for this is, my strings are loose, so I can actually pop these out using this is a string winder for when I'm tuning up. I can just turn the string really quickly, or better than beating your wrist up. And it's also got a little thing on the end. Just pop those out. So those will come out, and I'll just leave them tied up there so I don't have a big mess to deal with. Now, this saddle is in there pretty tight, so I'm not going to take it out, and that's what you want. You want it to be really, really tight. The saddle itself is bone, just like the nut. It's going to be hard to see. I'll show you with a different saddle. There's a thing called compensation that you have to do with this. It's an angle or a ridge on top of that saddle, and basically it helps the guitar stay in tune no matter where you're playing. You want it to be the string has to be the right length, so you can manipulate that a little bit. But the saddle starts off like this, just a blank, and it's kind of the same as the nut for a second. You have to, obviously that's not going to work, so you mark it, put it in the vise, make some rough cuts, and then then the difference here is you have to go ahead and get the size perfect as far as how long it's going to be. Not like the nut. The nut you could leave the size as long as you want until the final process. We have to do this in order for it to drop down. There's actually a slot in here that this is sitting in, so it's not glued on top or anything. So we have to drop this down in the slot. So we get that to fit nice and tight. Again, everything needs to be, as precise as it can be. And then basically, this is called a string height, a string action gauge. And when I set this down, it's going to be too high. So I will tune everything up. I've got the nut on. I'll go to these are called frets. And I'll come to the 12th fret, and I'll basically take a measurement. I've got measuring increments on the side here, and I'll go through and mark what each one is on a piece of paper, the height, and then there's basically a little fairly simple formula that you'll do. There's a simple formula that you'll do however much you want to take off, however much material you want to take off to achieve the right height. So I'll apply that. I'll draw a little line here so I know what I actually have exposed at the base of the saddle, and then I'll take that out, and basically from the line I will make little dots for each string where my measurements tell me I want them, and then I'll get all that nice and roughly done, and then the process of taking the strings off starts again. And then from that point, it's just taking them off, putting them back on, and just bringing it down, to a nice level. A lot of times I'll get this shape because it's contoured, again, like the radius. It does the same thing as the nut. It's got a curve to it. And so I'll achieve that with the string height. And then a lot of times I'll just take the bottom of the saddle and take material off that way. And if you can, I'm not sure if this will show, there's actually an angle that goes like that and then shoots back and then comes this way. It's on the ridge of that, and that's all done by hand. Just I would come through and I would rough shape all that, and then you have to do the back side, get that line exactly where I'm looking for it, and then it's time to polish everything, and that's going to happen with successively lower grits of sandpaper. Basically, I'll start with something like this. I think maybe that's maybe like 300 grit, and then I'll go further and further down. This is a 1500, and then I actually use what are called polishing papers, and these do have some grit to them, and just do successive pieces till we're to the final polish paper. And you're going to want something that comes out looking nice and shiny and pretty like that.